thinks that this is okay to vote no on this. He said to somebody, he expects to get a pass from the speaker, but he's thinking of a different speaker. Don't get out that.
The speaker was very masterful about rounding up members who had difficulties with the Affordable Care Act for whatever reason. She had to persuade those members kind of one by one that they had to go onto the bill. You do not take it to the floor for debate until you have the votes locked up.
I had a little disturbing report, and he said we expect to get a pass on this. There are no passes, especially on something as central to who we are as Democrats.
Oh my gosh, it's Nancy Pelosi like you've never seen her before. That was a clip from the new HBO documentary, Pelosi in the House, from acclaimed documentarian Alexandra Pelosi, who is also the daughter of Nancy Pelosi. It follows the House Speaker's extraordinary career over the past 3 decades, giving viewers an up-close look at some of the biggest trials and triumphs of her time in Congress, including the turbulent fight over Obamacare and the destruction unleashed on the Capitol during the January 6th insurrection. And Alexandra Pelosi joins us now. It's great to have you. Joe and I have been around your mom, and all of a sudden there'll be you. With your camera or, just sort of anywhere. You just kind of come out of the woodwork and there you are. And so I wonder if you could share with us what this has been like for you, and especially being your mom. Did it give you kind of an edge, maybe perhaps another documentarian might not have, just because you know her so well?
Yeah.
Well, growing up 2 feet behind Nancy Pelosi, really my entire adult life for 35 years, I've been able to see how everyone treats her to her face, but then I also get to hear everything they say behind her back because I'm 2 feet behind. And so that was always intriguing to me, the disconnect between how they treat her to her face and then what they say the minute she walks away. I also thought it was really interesting the way how things played out in the room when it happened compared to how it looked on the news that night. So that was another sort of disconnect I was always sort of intrigued by, that's what really inspired me to sort of, in the end. Of course, that film clip you just showed, that was 2009. And it's been a long time, and it never ended up in public because I'm not on social media. Any of this footage was never out there before. So I guess she just kind of got so used to me always being around and always filming that it was never a question of, no one ever knew I was making a movie. It was just sort of accidental. I mean, I never put a microphone on her. It's not like this was authorized. I was just always filming. And then, I figured now that she stepped down was the appropriate time to sort of share some of this stuff with the world.
How amazing. Wonderful.
It's been such an amazing journey. You look at the fight for the Affordable Care Act and what your mom did in shepherding that through, just beyond masterful. And in any other documentary, that would probably be the highlight. But both of your parents have been impacted so much, obviously. I remember standing in the back of the house, leaning on the rails with your father when your mom was being sworn in as the first woman Speaker of the House. And I was thinking, well, this is a pretty great swan song. This is pretty awesome. Then she did it again. Then she guided everybody in Congress through the hell of January the 6th. And then, of course, the tragedy of your father. It's just, I'm sure there's no way you could have imagined half of what was going to go, but also how directly and how personally it would impact you and your family.
Right. I told my mother when we were in the ICU on the day that my dad was attacked, I told her I would never have given her permission to run 35 years ago if I'd known that was where it was going to end. Because, I was the youngest of 5. I was the only one at home when she came to me and said, Mommy has the chance to run for Congress. And I said, Mom, get a life. And she always loved that story because I was like, what teenager doesn't want their mom out of the house, right? I wanted her out when I was a teenager. And then when you think about what happened in those 35 years on the other end of it. Now, my father is the one that defends her entire career and says, even after everything that's happened to him, he says to me, you cannot say that. You can't say that you would erase her entire career just because you don't like the fact that I ended up looking like Frankenstein in the ICU. You have to say, in this social media environment today, I would not give you permission to run. But you can't say, yeah.
And, you know, the viciousness of it all. Yeah, and the viciousness, your mom's been targeted for decades by Republicans, been vicious about it. I knew her when I first got to Congress, loved her from the beginning, even though we disagreed on so many issues. We got together every year on China and always loved her. There was always this huge disconnect. But you've got to feel so vindicated that year after year after year, Republicans think that running against your mother is a winning strategy, and year after year after year, they lose time and time again. The demonization of Nancy Pelosi has never worked in American politics.
But it trickles down to the unwell, and then you end up,
right.
You know, I didn't want to end up in the ICU. It's sad for me to think about all those years that she was being demonized, and they put a big target on her back, and they spent hundreds of millions of dollars in ads to attack her. And then where does that land? Well, we all now know where it lands. So for me, it's just heartbreaking that my father, in the end, had to be the one that paid the price for her political career.
Alexandra, I have 3 simple little questions for you. 1, did your mother watch this film with you? 2, what was her reaction if she did indeed watch the film with you? And 3, filming all the time. This is decades of filming that went into this documentary. You, as an editor, how many times did you have to stop looking at the past and say, I got to remember, this is my mom?
Well, we did have a screening at the National Archives this week, and she did show up, even though I scheduled the screening to be right when they had votes. She did manage to make it. She was on the edge of her seat because she was very nervous about what was going to come next. After we had an interesting conversation, she thought I made some very curious editorial decisions. She did not, she respected my artistic license. She didn't understand why I had to show her in her pajamas all the time, doing her laundry, or she didn't understand why I had to film or use private conversations she was having, like when she's talking to Joe Biden, trying to give him advice about how to run for president. She didn't think that that was appropriate to share with the world. Maybe she thought those kinds of things were private. She also said, I just never knew you were filming so much footage. Because a lot of times when I was filming, like during COVID, let's take COVID, for example, my family moved to the West Coast and we were living with him, and I'd be filming all the time. And she'd say, why are you filming all of this? She never understood, because she never had a microphone. It was just my iPhone. Yeah. You know, the iPhone really is, this is like an ad for iPhone. This whole film is just, so she was really sort of just more confused about why I would take her entire life and just put it in her pajamas and, you know, doing the laundry, I think is the answer.
Certainly predictable that she would have some notes on the film. So let's take a look at another clip of the documentary with Nancy Pelosi talking about her sixth sense.
I have a sixth sense about the scent of elections, and I smell success wherever I go.
You are impossible to crack. You're always on message.
No.
How do you do it? How do you always stay on all the time? You're impossible to crack. You know that.
Yeah. Well, I have my sensitivities.
What does that mean?
That means I have to be sensitive to the impact of my words on certain other campaigns. You know, if I'm saying I can smell success, it means I can smell lack of success as well.
You're a tough nut to crack, you know that? There's no cracking you, huh?
No. Well, if that's what you want to do, crack your mom.
Yes, I do. I want to crack you.
So tell us a little bit about that moment, when it happened. Does she ever crack when your iPhone's not around? And just tell us what that means, how you can glean from that as to the success that she's had.
Well, the point of why I included that was to make them, people expect when she comes home, she just like unplugs and lets it all out and just starts, trash talking or something. It's in her DNA. That whole Democratic Party talking points is who she is as a human being. She was born in the Democratic Party. Her father was in Congress. She thinks that the Capitol is the temple of democracy. So she's always on message. So even when you just get her on the couch and you just unwind, you say, now just tell me how you really feel. That's who she is. She'll start talking to you like she's a
guest on the show.
Podium. Yeah, exactly. It's not an act. That's who she is 24/7. And that's why I thought it was important to make that point, that it is who she is. She didn't choose this life. It chose her. She's just, do you understand that?
Yeah,
Got
makes
it.
sense.
You know, something else that we found through the years that's also just part of her foundation as a person is her faith. I remember talking to her before she got sworn in this second time, and she showed me a picture of her father, and she was talking about him and talking about him fondly. And I said, oh my gosh, he would be so proud to be here today. And without looking at the picture, without thinking twice, she goes, he is here today. He's looking down at me, and I'm so grateful for that. I could also tell, though, she's grateful for that faith that she doesn't wear on her sleeves, but anytime you're behind closed doors, the topic of faith always comes up.
Yep, she took the whole family to the Vatican this summer. In the film, we go to the Vatican. That was a few years ago. But this summer, which is not in the film, she took us all there. And the only reason why I mention that is because we were very amused because, the way it swirls out in the haters, the kind of things they say about Nancy Pelosi and her pro-choice stance. But in the end, she was hugging it out with the Pope. So I'm like, mic drop.
Yeah, exactly.
The documentary Pelosi in the House is available now on HBO and HBO Max. Alexandra Pelosi, I know you don't want to crack your mom. She seemed a little bit, like, what are you doing here?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
She loves you. And wow,
It's great.
this looks amazing. Thank you very much for being on
Can't
this
wait.
morning.
Thank you for having me.